To the respected Tide, to your respected friends, we're going to go ahead and start the evening, and I'm going to invite 3 sounds of the bell for us to come back to our breath. Allow ourselves to settle into our seat, whether we're seated in a chair or on the floor, allowing ourselves to let go of our thoughts of the day and come back to our body in the present moment, right here, right now. Mindfully following my breath. Becoming aware of my in-breath. Breathing out, allowing my body to slowly soften, allowing the tension in my body to slowly melt away. Becoming aware of our in-breath. Exhaling, becoming aware of our out. Not doing anything, just becoming aware. Allowing our body to settle down. Allowing our mind to settle down. Letting go of our thoughts. Letting go of our worry, our anxiety, anything that's bothering us. Coming back to the present moment. Being present with our body, right here, right now. If you're seated in the chair, feel your back against the chair. Allow your back to soften. Feel your buttocks in the chair. Feel your feet firmly planted on the ground. If you're seated on the cushions, feel yourself in a stable posture. Whether that's full lotus, half lotus, or chrysanthemum pose. Allowing your body to drop in this very moment, right here, right now. Coming back to take care of ourselves. Allowing ourselves to shut the doors to the outside. And coming back to the landscape within inside of ourselves. Allowing ourselves to take care of ourselves right here. Take 2 or 3 deep in and out. Not rushing your breath, just being aware. A lot of times it's not so easy for us to do that because we have so many distractions. Our mind is usually running a mile away. Allowing ourselves to not have to think about it, not have to worry about it. Being aware of any tension within our mind. Being aware of aches and creaks. Maybe we have pain here, maybe we have pain. And gently breathe and send your loving energy into that part of the body. Not having to get rid of it, which is merely recognizing. So, dear community, today's practice, I'm just going to share about my experience of being in the practice for about 13 years when I was a monk in Plum Village. I was fortunate to be, I ordained in 2002 with Tai. And at that time, we still had to go to France to be able to ordain in the Plum Village tradition. And I remember I went over there just as first to pay my respects to my teacher, because originally I received my 5 mindfulness trainings from Tai back in 1989 when he first came to the United States. And California was one of the areas that he first came to. And at that time, I remember I took my 5 mindfulness trainings because my mom told me to, not because I wanted to, because at that time I was like 15, 16 years old. Didn't really know what the 5 mindfulness trainings was. And at that time, my mom goes, "Oh, by the way, tomorrow morning, there's going to be a 5 mindfulness training ceremony, and you're taking your 5 mindfulness." I'm like, okay, whatever. So I got up early the next morning and went and took my 5 mindfulness trainings. And Tai gave me the name Strength of the Heart. In Vietnamese, it's Ampo, which is strength of the heart. And then, needless to say, at 17 and a half, I went into the military. And so my 5 mindfulness trainings actually went out the door because I was in the military. And at 17 and a half, away from mom, away from dad, didn't really have anybody telling me what to do. And I could do whatever I wanted, pretty much. So my 5 mindfulness trainings went out the door. But then I really came back to the practice after 95, after I got back from my time in service. I went through quite a bit with my PTSD, as well as in the military. Quite a bit, we do what we call self-medication, which is we would go out and drink quite a bit. So therefore, I had to deal with that also. And then in 95, I came back and I was struggling quite a bit. And my mom continued in the practice, and she received her OI training, which is our 14 mindfulness trainings, which is in the Chinese tradition, it would kind of be our Bodhisattva vows. And the funny thing is, when Tai wrote the book Interbeing, that was when the United States went to war with Iraq the second time. Originally, Tai, when he wrote the book Stepping into Freedom, that was when Death Storm was broke out. So needless to say, my mom continued on the path of practice and encouraged me to go back and on this practice again. Because at that time, in 95, there wasn't a lot that was known about PTSD or PTS, and there wasn't a lot of therapies out there. And myself, I didn't want to take medication. I didn't want to take drugs. And so I chose the route of, well, I didn't really choose. I went to visit Tai in France because it's been a while since I had a vacation. So my mom goes, oh, why don't you go to Plum Village and see Tai? Okay. So I went over to Plum Village, and originally I was planning on coming back and going to Oriental medicine school because I wanted to learn Oriental medicine so I can actually start healing people. I spent a number of years doing massage therapy after I left the military to be able to change the energy inside of myself from my military experience. Because when I was I worked with two different special operations units. One of them was the Navy SEALs, the other one was Marine Force Recon. I was a combat medic. So I had a lot of trauma coming back during that time. And then I stayed for the summer of, or I got there in the winter, and then close to spring is when they were having the ordination. And I was actually surprised because I wrote the request to be an aspirant. And normally the aspirant phase is quite a long time, right? But I somehow, Tai and the monastic brothers were all like, hurry up and get him in before he changes his mind. Because Tai and Sister Chakam saw how much suffering I had. At that time, you didn't really see a smile on my face. You didn't really see, the happiness or the sunlight within me, right? And Tai and Sister Chakam were like, hurry up, get him in. Otherwise, he might change his mind, and we might lose the opportunity to be able to help him transform his suffering. And so they accepted me for aspirantship. So I thought, okay, it was probably going to be about a year before I ordained. No, it was actually 5 days. And then I ended up ordaining April of 2020, 2002, yeah. And then when I joined monastic Sangha, I showed up there. I quit drinking cold turkey. I quit smoking cold turkey. Walked into the registration office and told the registration person, hey, I might be cranky, and I might be irritated, and I might be agitated. So just so you know. And so they're like, okay, yeah, we can deal with that. And then I started my practice as a monastic. And then later on, during 2002, that's when the U.S. Had difficulties with Iraq and went to war with Iraq the first time. And at that time, I was working in the registration office, getting ready for the Italian retreat, and Tai just got back from Germany, and he came in because during that time I got news that some of the guys that I served with actually died. They were the first casualties of the war in Iraq, and 3 of them died in the first helicopter crash of the Iraq War. The other 4 died securing the landing zone because they got ambushed. And so Tai didn't know that. He only thought that one of my friends died. And he came in, and Tai was kind of like, "How are you doing?" And at that time, I was just running around doing, getting ready for the retreat, not really focusing on dealing or touching the suffering that was inside of me. To hear that 7 of my guys, we were close together, quite a bit close, that they were no longer here. And then when Tai found out 7, Tai was kind of a little bit at a loss for words. And Tai was sharing like, "I'm sorry to hear that." And Tai looked at me and said, "What are you going to do for them?" And at first I was sitting here scratching my head going, "What do you mean? What am I going to do for them?" Right? They're dead. And Tai was all like, "I know that they're dead. But the thing is that because we have this war going on, what are you going to do to be able to help the other veterans or the other soldiers or Marines or airmen that are going to be coming back after them?" And so that started lighting a fire underneath my feet because of the fact that how am I supposed to teach them if I don't embody the practice? So therefore, I have to start working on my walking meditation. I have to start working on my sitting meditation. I have to start working on being able to come back to my breathing when I have a strong emotion. Because if I can't do that, how am I supposed to teach them how to do it? Right? And so that really started lighting the fire for me to really focus on my practice. Not just go through the motion. Not take the time that I have within the Sangha for granted. Right? Because where else in the world are you going to have a chance and have a schedule that is going to dictate your practice? Right? Because we are set on a schedule in the monastery. Right? We know we're waking up every day at 4:45. Because that 5:30 you have sitting meditation. And you know that you're going to have a silent breakfast at 7 o'clock that facilitates you to be able to be fully present with your community around you, the food that you're eating. Not having to be in a rush, not having to start off your day talking, and just having that calm, that quietness to yourself. And then not being in a rush to do things. Right? Because when we're in the monastery, we know that, okay, if it doesn't get done, it's still going to be there tomorrow. And even if we do get it done, there's going to be the next project, and then the next project, and then the next project. Right? And it's about how do we cultivate our practice of mindfulness and being aware of what's coming up for us when we're doing that work. And also the way that we eat. And the reason why I'm smiling is because one of my brothers, Dave, and I used to be monastics together. And also both of us are also part of the military. So in the military, when you're going through boot camp, you don't necessarily get to eat in a calm manner, right? You're kind of like a vacuum cleaner. You hurry up and scarf down the food and get outside on the grinder or the parade ground before your instructors get out there. Otherwise, your whole unit's going to be punched, right? So we're always scarfing down food. But then when we join the monastery, we learn how to eat mindfully. Right? We learn how to slow down our chewing. We learn how to help ourselves break down that food using our saliva, using our jaw, versus taking 2 or 3 bites or chewing 2 or 3 times and swallowing. Right? Because when we do that, our body or our stomach has to break down food. And our body doesn't get as much nutrients as when we actually break it down with our jaw. And we actually chew the food. Our saliva is actually helping to break down the food. How many of you, when you guys are eating, before you even finish chewing, you're already picking up your spoon, fork, to grab another bite? Right? But you haven't finished chewing what's in your mouth. How many of you are actually thinking quite a bit while you're eating? Right? Everything that you're thinking about also goes into your system. That's the reason why I remind people with families, especially people with families, if you're eating together as a family, don't talk about any heavy stuff until all the dishes are cleared away from the table. Because we're also consuming what we're talking about. So if you're talking about a lot of heavy stuff, a lot of negative stuff, you're also eating that into your system. How many of you have finished the meal and felt very heavy in your stomach? And a lot of it is also because we're not aware of that consumption of what we're talking about, or what we're watching. Because sometimes we're sitting there eating and we have our iPad, our TV going, whatever the case may be. So we're also consuming. That's why I tell a lot of times when I talk to my veterans, I tell them, you don't have to be watching the news 24/7. Because if you're watching that news 24/7, you're ingesting everything that's going on 24/7. And like today, when I was talking to one of my veterans, he didn't make the connection, right? And the thing is that the DoD, Department of Defense, signed a contract with Red Bull and Monster. That's the reason why all of our forward operating bases have Red Bull and Monster on. Because they know that the veteran or the soldiers are going to be sleep deprived. And so therefore, a lot of our veterans or soldiers are going to be drinking 5 to 6 Red Bulls or Monsters a day. But if you don't have a way to release that energy, or you don't work it out of your system, that energy is going to be in your system. And then they're amped up on adrenaline. But the other side effect to that is also it affects your heart. Because of all of that caffeine that is in that drink or those drinks, especially if you're drinking 5 or 6 a day, You wonder why they come back with heart problems. You wonder why they come back with adrenaline problems. That's partly why. Right? Because I was talking to one of my veterans and he was just all like, because I used the analogy of a faucet, a water faucet, right? When you crank a water faucet maximum full blast for over 3 months, and then you try to turn it off, what happens? The gasket might not be good anymore. Or that water faucet gets stuck, right? So even if you crank that water faucet off, it's still leaking. Right? And so all that stuff is things that I've learned when I was in monastery. And the cool thing about mindfulness is we can use ourselves as our own science investigation report. Right? And what I mean by that is just take a look at yourself. Right? How's our breathing when we're relaxed? How is our breathing when we're anxious? Right? Our body is our GPS system. Our breathing is our GPS system. And scientifically, they've shown that with scientific research, the only way to deregulate your limbic system or your nervous system is by coming back to your breath and taking a deep breath. That's the only way you're going to be able to downshift that. And the funny thing is, I have a lot of time to be able to spend around our teacher because I have the fortunate opportunity to also be his attendant a number of times and be around him and be able to learn directly from him. And I remember when our teacher was first allowed back to Vietnam, and myself and one of my elder brothers, Thầy Phật Đầu, he was Vietnamese Special Forces during the Vietnam and Cambodia War. And he was asked to be Thai's bodyguard, and I was the other person that was in charge because that was the first time we went back to Vietnam, and we weren't sure what was going to happen, especially with the Vietnamese government. And when I was in the military, I also had the opportunity to be an executive bodyguard for a 4-star admiral. And so I kind of went back into that mode. And one of my monastic sisters asked me, how is it being Thai's bodyguard, right? Because especially now, I'm a monastic. I'm not walking around carrying a gun. I'm not walking around carrying, a baton or mace or anything like that, right? Which when I was in the military, I was able to carry those things. Right? And the funny thing is, I look back at being a monastic and my time in the military, and I saw that there's a couple of things that were the same, right? One thing is my head was still shaved, right? The second thing is we still wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The third thing is I still have a uniform, right? Because as a monk, we wear the robes of a monk, right? In the military, we have our military uniforms. Right? The fourth thing is we're still walking everywhere we're going, right? But the difference is now as a monk, I'm walking with steps of freedom. I'm walking 12 steps of peace, right? I no longer have to carry them. I no longer have to march anywhere. I no longer have to carry a heavy boot. But I can actually downregulate, walk, breathe, smile, and be free. You know? And as a monk, my weapon now is my smile, right? And the thing is, that allows us to de-escalate a lot of things. Right? How contagious is a smile? Right? And scientific experiments where they've done this in Germany, where people just are standing on a platform in the train station and they start laughing and start giggling. And the next thing you know, the whole train station is laughing and giggling. Right? And that helps diffuse a lot. But in order for that to happen, you have to have that peace within inside of yourself. You know? And the fortunate thing is my mom and my grandmother and my stepdad are all still monastics. I left because I wanted to do the work with the veterans. But for the most part, a lot of my family are still monastics. My mom and my grandmother are both nuns at Deer Park Monastery in Escondido. My mom is actually in charge of the bookshop there. My grandmother is 95 years old, and she still walks around. She still attends whatever activities she can within the sangha. My stepdad is in our monastery in New York, Blue Cliff, and he's the high venerable there now. So each one of our centers normally has a high-ranking monk in charge, or not really in charge, but they're kind of like as a stability tree where that person, because of the number of years within the practice, makes and helps the sangha become a lot more solid. Right? Because just by the virtue of their practice, day in and day out, seeing them no matter what, rain, shine, whatever the case may be, they're always at sitting meditation. Right? They're always there leading by example. You know, and that helps the younger generation, the younger monastics, have faith in the practice. And the most important thing that Tai always reminded me is to nourish that happiness. Right? When you're having a difficult moment, when you're having that difficult time. Because trust me, on the monastic path, just like in life, you will run into bumps, you will run into obstacles, right? But the more that you nourish your happiness, the more that you're going to be able to get through that obstacle. Because within psychology, they talk about if you deal with your past a lot, you deal with depression. If you deal with your future a lot, or you're always thinking about the future, you're dealing with your anxiety. And the only time that we have is right here, right now, in the present moment. Right? And that's our appointment with life. But if we learn how to breathe, we learn how to create that happiness right now, right here. 5 minutes from now, what does that become? It becomes all past. But that past is a happier past. Versus us just only thinking about our regrets. Or we should have done this, we should have done that. And that's why recently, to remind myself, I bought art piece that was from Japan. Because over in Japan, they have a new thing where they take Japanese pottery and they break it and they reinfuse it with gold and silver. Because that's there to remind me that when we can overcome and we can mend ourselves, heal ourselves, we actually become more valuable. Right? Because in our lives, each one of us, whatever the circumstances are, we can always be broken at some point in time. Right? But when we learn how to put ourselves back together, when we learn how to heal ourselves, then we add a lot more value and substance to our life. And that's one of the things that we were always taught, is when we have understanding, we have love. And so one of the things that I always practice is dealing with the 5 principles of Reiki. Right? The very first principle, just for today, I will not be angry. Right? We're not asking you for the long haul, right? We're asking you just for today. Right? Just right now. Just like when I was doing the guided meditation, right? I asked you to let go of your thoughts or your worries, not forever, just right now, just right here, just in this present moment. And so if you can let go of your anger just for a moment, then it no longer affects you. And when we have that anger, if we don't learn how to forgive, the first person that it hurts is us. Because that person that might have hurt you, they might have forgotten about it. Right? But you're still lumping it around. You're still carrying it around. You're still holding on to, oh, he said this, she said that. But they might have forgotten about it already. Right? The more that you cling to it, the more that you hold on to it, the more destruction it does to you. So for your sake, for your peace of mind, let it go. Imagining you taking a lighter and lighting that piece of paper, writing on that piece of paper and lighting that piece of paper and releasing it and allowing it to become smoke. Send it up to the heavens. Right? Because it's not necessarily us condoning the other person or what they did is right, but for your peace, let it go. So it doesn't have a hold. Because otherwise you're always going to be walking around with that wound inside of yourself. And if you're waiting for that person to forgive you, that might not happen. Or if you're waiting for that person to come up to you and say, oh, I'm sorry, that might not ever happen. So the best thing that you can do is forgive yourself. Because we're always evolving. And that's the one thing that I always like about the word hope. The word hope. We're not thinking about despair, we're thinking about gratitude. Hope also stands for help other people evolve. So when you're being able to, every single time we interact with somebody else, we're always sharing ourselves with them. They're sharing themselves with us. The next principle of Reiki is just for today, I will not worry. Where has worry gotten us? Can we do anything with worry? Worry is kind of like being in a rocking chair, right? How many of us have sat in a rocking chair? What directions does that rocking chair go? Back and forth, right? Back and forth. Is that getting you anywhere? Nope. So basically you're stomping your feet and running around in circles, right? And kind of like a car, right? When you step on the gas and step on the brake, what happens? You spin your wheels, right? And when you spin your wheels, it does more damage to the car, right? Because you're burning the tires. And if you're not careful, you're going to ruin the car, right? And you're not going in. You know, and that's the same thing with our work. When the only thing that we're doing is we're thinking about our worry, it's not going to help us. Letting it go, come back and revisit it later on. How many of you have had a situation where you kept on racking your brain, trying to come up with a solution, right? And then you just forget about it and go to bed, or you're so tired and you just go to bed, right? And you're no longer thinking about it. You're no longer stressing about it, right? And then maybe in the morning you wake up, or 2 or 3 days later, when you're not so focused on that problem, what comes to you? The solution, the answer to the problem, right? But because you're so focused and you're so, I'm holding on to this, I'm not letting it go, right? And in psychology, they use the analogy of a monkey, right? They cut a hole in a barrel and they put a banana in there. And the monkey puts his hand in there to pick up the banana and is trying to pull out the banana through that hole. But if the monkey would just drop the banana, it would be able to take its hand out, right? But because it wants that banana and its hand out at the same time, it's not going to happen. Right? The next one, just for today, I would do my work honestly. Right? And looking at doing our work honestly. You know, also means looking at us having that passion, that joy in the work that we do. Right? Also having integrity in that work that we do. You know, we can all go through the motions. But when you genuinely care and you genuinely have passion for it, other people would see that in the way that you carry yourself, in the way that you do things. For instance, trust me, I can tell because like I work for the VA. You can walk into the VA and you can see who's just going through the motion and who actually really cares for the veterans. Right? Because of the fact that they have integrity, they have a purpose in life that they want to be able to help. other people, right? And you can see that through how they do things, how they carry themselves. The next one, the fourth one, just for today, I will be kind to my neighbors and every living being. Right? Coming back again to recognize that we're not individual people. We are a collective society. When we help other people, we also help ourselves. Right? How do you guys feel when you're able to help someone else? Right? When you have problems and you let go of your problems and you're able to help somebody else. You're not focused on yourself. It's not only about me. It's also about what can we do for others. Because we never know what we might need help. And the funny thing is, looking at steel, right? We think that steel is very strong, very tough, right? But what's the only thing that can destroy steel? Besides taking an actual torch to it or fire to it. Rust. And where does rust come from? Rust comes from steel. So it's the only one that's doing damage to itself. Right? So when we come back and we take care of ourselves, we take care of our neighbors, then you'll be surprised because they'll turn around and take care of you as well. And that's what it means to be able to live in a community. Because like over in Hawaii, they say it takes a whole village to take care of one person. And that one person's success or failure is upon that whole village. And that's why in a lot of Asian cultures, wherever you grew up in, the aunties, the uncles that live in that neighborhood, oh, trust me, they're going to be keeping an eye on you, and they're going to be helping to raise you. It's not just going to be mom and dad, right? It's going to be that whole village raising you and keeping an eye on you. And that's why I don't think that you're going to get away with anything, because you're not going to get away with anything because everybody in that village is going to have their eyes on you. Right? But that goes to show us that we need to come back and take care of each other. And the fifth one is just for today, I will be thankful for all my blessings. To be able to live our life with gratitude. To be able to live our life and really be grateful for the blessings that we have. Sometimes we take those for granted. Yeah, but just to be able to slow ourselves down and just to be able to think that, we have a lot of fortunate things in our lives. And sometimes our difficulties allow us to learn. And it allows us to become more resilient. It allows us to work through things. Because our teacher reminded us the Asian way of how do you clean a pair of chopsticks or a bunch of chopsticks. You take them, you bundle them up in your hand, and you take soap and you put it on the edges of the chopsticks, and you go like this. And when you're going like that, the chopsticks are rubbing against each other. And when they rub against each other and that friction, it creates that rubbing and it takes off the whatever's stuck to it, right? And that's the same thing with us. When we hit an obstacle and we feel that friction, it's also allowing us to see where we still need to work on. Because we know that we're not perfect. And that's also the other thing that I like about the Japanese, right? Because I used to very much enjoy Japanese tea ceremonies, right? And a lot of the Japanese ceramic tea cups, right? If that person is a true master, when they make it, they'll always put an imperfection in there. Because they know there's no such thing as perfection. Because the thing is, when you think that you're perfect, you also cause other people to suffer. Because other people might not be able to live up to your level of perfection. Right? And so the Japanese, they'll put a little indentation here, or they'll make one side a little bit bigger than the other side. Because they know that there's no such thing as perfection. But yet, they will spend a lifetime to try to master a skill. Right? To be a Japanese tea master, it's 15 years of apprenticeship. And you think, wait a minute, you're only drinking tea. Why is it going to take you 15 years to master that? Right? No. Japanese tea master, you have to know what type of food goes with what type of tea, during what type of season. You have to know artwork, because you're usually the one that writes the calligraphy. You have to know hibana, which is flower arranging, because you have to do the hibana display, the flower arrangement display. And you also have to know landscaping, because you have to set out the outside of the tea house as well. So that's why it's a 15-year process to learn how to master it. But within that 15-year process, what are you learning how to master? You're learning how to master yourself. Because that requires you to slow down. That requires you to do that internal work. So I'd like to invite everybody to go ahead and sit straight up. And we're going to go ahead and bring this session to a close unless you guys have any questions. Go ahead and listen to 3 sounds of come back to our breathing.